are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Hello and welcome to Law Talk on Germantown Municipal Television. My name is Vince Perryman. I'm a local attorney with the law offices of J. Vincent Perryman. Each month, Law Talk focuses on a wide range of legal issues and topics. Today's show, we cover prenuptial and postnuptial agreements. With us is local attorney Larry Rice. Larry, thanks for being with us again.
Glad to be here.
And, you know, today's topic, I think, is one of those that a lot of people always wonder about is what all can I put in a prenup? And if I forgot to put something in a prenup, can I do it after I've gotten married?
Actually, in Tennessee, now you can. The first thing we want to talk about is what are we going to call it? Okay. There's prenup and antenuptials, and it's A-N-T-E, not A-N-T-I. An antenuptial agreement would be an agreement against marriage. And I've always thought that trying to ask your beloved to sign a prenuptial agreement would probably be an anti-nuptial agreement. But what we're talking about is prenuptial and A-N-T-E nuptial agreement. Ante meaning before, like antebellum South means the South before the Civil War. So let's get that straight, because I know people have heard antenuptial and prenuptial. But your question actually goes to postnuptial. And in Tennessee, we can do postnuptial, but they're held to the same standard as a prenuptial, okay? We've kind of dropped the term ante because it just confuses people, okay? But this Tennessee Supreme Court, Janice Holder, I believe, was the one who wrote the opinion, said that you can, if it makes sense to do it before you get married, it may well make sense to do it afterwards. Now, just to keep things more confusing, we have prenup, we have antenuptial, we have reconciliation agreements, and we have postnuptial agreements. A reconciliation agreement is a little bit different in that the parties have split up or they're contemplating getting divorced, and they make this agreement to justify them getting back together and giving a roadmap to get out of it. The last agreement you're going to get to is a marital dissolution agreement. And that's one that hopefully is easy to do because you thought ahead and did a prenuptial agreement in the very beginning.
Yeah, I have to say the easiest MDA, marriage dissolution agreement I ever did was one where there was a prenup. You know, I mean.
And they're so much more common than they used to be. In fact, in our new form book, our marital dissolution agreement even has a provision that says we're incorporating the prenuptial agreement, and if there are any conflicts between the two, then either depending on which side we're on, what provision we're talking about, either the marital dissolution agreement or the prenuptial agreement will control. So there's a lot of things. One of the things that you really, really want to do in a prenuptial agreement is make sure that it's preserved. Early in my career, I was involved in a litigation that went on and on and on and on, involving a story where the second wife told this lovely story about having been married to her well-off husband for several years, and then one night during Johnny Carson, which shows you how old this story is, during Johnny Carson, he told her to go get the prenuptial agreement out of the safety deposit box they had in the house, and he wanted to provide for her, and which was to the detriment of his children from the first marriage, his only children, by doing away with that agreement. And according to her, they burnt it in the fireplace in a very moving ceremony, which was a lovely story. except the children did not believe the story at all, because when the husband died in the middle of the night, the next morning, bright and early, the wife's first stop was at the bank where the real safety deposit box was. And she was let into the safety deposit box by herself. And according to some folks, when she left, there was a whisk of smoke and a spot of ash left in the room. So the moral of that story is, if you do a prenuptial agreement, don't keep it to yourself. Don't hide it. Make sure that prenuptial agreement, Vince, if you were my son, I was going to go, I'm getting ready to marry this gorgeous gold digger of a second wife. I know she's a gold digger, but I got her to sign this prenuptial agreement. My son, Vince, hold on to this. This is your golden ticket, okay? Because if we get divorced and if you don't have that, she's going to wind up with gold, okay? The way we deal with it, we gave people that instruction for a long time. But what we've now done is the prenuptial agreement we have, we've got a provision in it that tearing it up doesn't cancel it. Writing on it, I cancel it, doesn't cancel it. That canceling it has to be done under oath, just like the prenuptial agreement, and the cancellation has to be registered in the Shelby County Registrar's Office. And because in the real world, you're my son Vince, here, let me give it to you, and my son Vince goes, this is great, I'm gonna put it right here so I'll always know where it is. And how many times have we fruitlessly looked for those things that we put someplace so we'll always know where it is? And it solves that problem.
Yeah, and I think that makes perfect sense, because the one thing that I always tell people if they say they're thinking about this or whatnot, I'm like, it's a contract. And, you know, it's one that transactional guys do contracts all the time. And really, divorce attorneys, they do contracts. That's what they're doing. And you've got to make sure that I know that there's a whole series of cases that talk about a bunch of the documents in divorce are really contracts.
You're absolutely right, and prenuptial agreements are really one of the more interesting historical studies in divorce. You go back to the beginning of the previous century, you go back to the 1900s, teens, 20s, 30s, prenuptial agreements were considered against public policy, and the judges from that generation were raised that way. In the 1950s, we actually had some appellate decisions where the Court of Appeals are going, why are these against public policy? These are people sitting down and rationally deciding what they want to do. So we're not going to make them against public policy. You just interpret them straight up. And while that became the law, there were still judges who'd been raised in the old school that looked askance at them and tried to break them down and bury them. But eventually those judges retired, died, moved on to something else. And the judges on the bench now understand that these are favored by public policy, so you interpret them as they are. Now, having said that,
And we're going to have to take a break right there.
I'll be looking forward to talking more after the break.
All right. When we return, we'll continue our discussion on prenuptials and postnuptial agreements. Please stay with us.
You make me wear my bike helmet. Taught me never to run with scissors. And to follow the swimming rules.
You tell me to stay away from drugs.
To always buckle my seatbelt.
So why do you keep a loaded gun in your drawer?
How safe is that?
You asked them to follow some safety rules. Now they're asking you. In fact, they're counting on you. Never let your gun get into the wrong hands. Remember, always lock it up. Visit ncpc.org.
Don't worry, 74 people were picked before me in the NFL draft.
To fight childhood obesity, United Way and the NFL are helping kids play at least 60 minutes a day.
Okay, time for the team obstacle course. Yay!
What this place needs is more healthy kids. To get involved or donate, go to unitedway.org/play60.
Now I get it.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Welcome back. I'm Vince Perryman, and you're watching Law Talk. Joining us on our show is local attorney Larry Rice. We're discussing prenuptial and postnuptial agreements. Larry, before the break, I cut you off abruptly as you were kind of giving the history of how the old guard of judges said this is against public policy, and the new guard has said, no, this is public policy, and they look at it from a contractual perspective. And with that, I mean, you know, it makes sense that just as prevalent as divorce is nowadays, to have it to where it's nice and clean and everybody knows what's going to happen if you go down that road.
And that's right. And you're right. And it's also interesting to look through the evolution of how we got to the point where we were pretty much considering so much of this contractual. But the one thing to really be aware of, children's issues aren't contractual.
Okay.
The trial courts are still charged with the duty to look out after children in divorce cases. So even if the parents contract something wacky, the trial judge is charged with the responsibility to go, how did y'all ever think of that, and why would you have thought I would have approved it? Whereas provisions in a prenuptial agreement, provisions in a marital dissolution agreement that deal with property, the judge may sit there and go, that sounds pretty wacky to me, but yeah, it's within the realm of what I can live with. So you get that dichotomy.
Okay, yeah, and that's always been interesting as far as, you know, best interest of the child being in there, and that definitely always has to be cleaned up. As far as how did we get to the point to where the judiciary in Tennessee is recognizing a right to a postnuptial agreement?
Well, it was a Tennessee Supreme Court decision. They'd already started viewing them as good for public policy. And it's kind of one of those things that once the judges started looking at it and going, well, wait a minute, this makes my life easier, these parties' life more rational, let's go with those. Then they had a case going up where for a while, when we first started doing it, and it was interesting because I ran into, before they had the case that you could do postnuptial, there were two different attorneys in two different parts of the state, and I was one of them, that figured out before the Supreme Court says you could do postnuptial, that you could actually make gifts to each other and effectively do a postnuptial agreement as to property.
Okay.
Then the Tennessee Supreme Court came along and said, that's a good idea, I think we'll do that. And they opened up the field so that even if you've got a marriage and it's existing, and you're not looking like you're getting ready to get divorced anytime in the immediate future, so you don't qualify for a reconciliation agreement, you can still do a postnuptial agreement.
And how do those function? I mean, because since it's a contract, and that's where I come from more than a divorce perspective, although I'll do a divorce because if there's money involved, I need it. But that's a whole different story there. The consideration for a postnuptial, what is that generally? Is that where you get into the gift, or?
Well, the rationale for the consideration in postnuptial agreement are the exchange of promises. You get the fishing boat, I get the big screen TV. You get this, I get this. That's the consideration. Okay. And then a smart lawyer always puts the $100 cash in hand paid,
okay.
Which is nominal consideration, but nominal consideration in Tennessee is?
Whatever you want. I mean, $1. I mean,
it's as good as any other consideration. Yeah.
So In the operation of all of these, I mean, we know we probably need to have a provision in there that records it with the Register of Deeds or puts it somewhere out there publicly so it can't be destroyed.
Yeah, I would only do that with a revocation.
Okay.
We looked at doing that with the prenuptial agreements for a while, but that put too much information in the public domain.
Right.
And so we like I say, we looked at doing that. I think we did a couple of those, and then we quit doing that because just putting the revocation there served our purposes.
I got you.
Okay.
And there's no way, because I know in estate planning, if we're concerned about some never-do-well destroying a will or something, we just go and give a copy to the probate court, because there's a mechanism for that. Is there any mechanism to do that with a prenup?
Not that I know of. What we do is, you got 3 kids, here you go. Here's the agreement, here's a copy for your wife-to-be, and here's a copy for each one of your kids.
Okay. And you know, Brian Kelsey watches our show, so I'm also trying to give him legislative ideas here before he gets to the end of the...
He's done a lot of good stuff and worked on some stuff. God bless him. He worked really hard on something near and dear to me, which was a college education provision. Thank you, Mr. Kelsey. You did a good job on that. And we got it good. Mississippi, you know, we in Tennessee from time to time look down at our brothers and sisters across the border in Mississippi and think we're more enlightened. In Mississippi, the court can provide for college educations for children of a marriage. And I literally had a case where the father went to Princeton and the mother had a PhD, and he had two very academic daughters, and he wasn't going to pay a penny for it.
Yeah.
But we convinced Judge Chandler. Remember Judge Chandler?
I remember the name.
Okay. If he was before your time, White Chandler was a wonderful, crazy guy to try a case in front of. I convinced him to give mom extra alimony to pay for the kids' college tuition.
Okay.
And that's the only case that college tuition ever got ordered in the state of Tennessee. And we actually got away with it with the Court of Appeals back in the old Court of Appeals. So Brian Kelsey worked really, really hard, and we got the provision through the House, through the committee, and it got killed on the Senate floor.
Okay. Well, that's a good place to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk more with Larry about prenuptial and postnuptial agreements. Please stay with us.
Here's your check.
Oh, you got it. You know, since I got rid of my car, I really enjoy walking.
Hey? God, no.
Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates.
Oh, you're home early.
You live with your mom?
That'll set your game back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Really? Buzz, what's up, man? You left some leaves burning out here.
Yeah, I just came in just for a second.
Come on, man. If it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to leave. You could torch the whole neighborhood.
It's a good point there, Smokey.
9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Welcome back. With us now is Larry Rice, and we're talking about prenuptial and postnuptial agreements. Larry, before the break, we were talking about, you know, some differences between Tennessee and Mississippi, and if I don't recall who's licensed where, but as far as in Mississippi, do they have the ability to do the postnuptial as well down there?
I'm not licensed to practice in Mississippi, and so I'm loath to give an opinion on Mississippi law. I do have several friends with Mississippi licenses. If anybody needs to know about Mississippi law, please let me know. And I've had the great joy on more than one occasion to serve as co-counsel or trial counsel down in Mississippi with a local Mississippi lawyer. And for those Mississippi lawyers who brought me down there, thank you very much. I always appreciate it.
Well, and I guess that leads me to another interesting question that just rolling around in my head. If somebody moves here from another state and they've already got a prenup, how does that work?
That's the great dilemma about prenuptial agreements. There's actually a school of thought that lawyers shouldn't do them because they are so inherently tricky. Say that you knew all the law, every statute case about all the prenuptial agreements, antenuptial agreements, postnuptial agreements, reconciliation agreements in Tennessee. Could you then draft a prenuptial agreement that your clients would know would be 100% enforceable?
I don't think you could.
No, because the first thing is you don't know where this agreement is going to be enforced. It could be enforced in Maine, it could be enforced in Madagascar, and Vince, you're very, very bright, but I don't think you know all 50 states and all foreign countries. And even if you're that bright, Vince, which you very well may be,
I doubt it.
It happens over time. And that requires you to have not only knowledge of all the laws in all the states and all the countries, but have perfect predictive power of who will change what when. Right now in Tennessee, the key to most people overturning agreements or holding on to them is the extent to which the financial disclosure is adequate. One of the issues that nobody's actually addressed yet is, can you waive that? Well, one day we'll find out. And the law in this area has changed significantly. For a while, you could have a prenuptial agreement as to property, but they wouldn't let you have it as to alimony. Then they said, well, no, you can do alimony now too, but you can't make provisions as to children. Will that change? Because we're not perfectly psychic to predict the future, all we can do is, one, our best guess, and two, have a severability clause in the agreement so that if we have something that offends the public policy or the statute of some other state or country where people are going to enforce this agreement, they can take that one provision out and the rest of the agreement stands.
And I would think from what you've just said, it would be prudent that if you're sort of a transient moving into another state, that you sit down with some sort of attorney that does these matters, especially in Tennessee. If we've got the opportunity to do a postnuptial, then you could have some opinion given as to, will this stand up in this state?
Well, you can do that, but one of the things a good lawyer can do to help his client, say the marriage takes place in Tennessee, then you put a provision in the prenuptial agreement that says the law of the state of Tennessee will control. And we haven't, but I'm really thinking that you ought to be able to say the law in the state of Tennessee as of 2017 will control. And that solves both your distance issue, Alabama, Arkansas, Arizona, whatever state you wind up in, and whatever they do to change the law out into the future. But let me say this before we run out of time. If you go to the casino and bet on red or black, you got a 50-50 bet. Statistically, by and large, marriage is a 50-50 bet. So if you could do anything to improve your odds on a red or black bet at the casino, you'd do it, right?
Right.
A prenuptial agreement is that 50-50 bet where you actually get to affect the odds, the result of your bet.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting dichotomy too, because when you start talking about prenuptials with individuals, they're in one of two pots. Either it is someone that is, I would not get married without one, or it's someone that's so offensive to me, I wouldn't marry a person that asked me that.
There is an enduring mystery to prenuptial agreements that I have always thought but never understood or figured out. And that is how you go, I love you more than life. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Now please sign this document so you don't wind up with my stuff. I don't know how that conversation goes. But some people apparently figure out how to make it work.
Well, and I think it's one of those that if you get somebody that comes to you as you're looking at marrying somebody and they say, hey, you should watch out for whatever reason, whether they use that term gold digger or whatever, get a simple one drafted up, put it in front of them, and then you can kind of find out what that individual's about.
Well, you know, I've actually had situations where I represented the person who came out better with the prenuptial agreement, and the other side was the one that was pushing it. And I never quite got to find out whether it was because they loved and cared so much for the other side, or they just didn't damn know that the other side had more money than they did.
Yeah, yeah, and that's always kind of the interesting things with these, because I, having worked in some of the rural counties, there was a couple that that I've heard about that both of them laughed because they had married one another because each one thought the other one had money, and it turned out that this was what they did. So, you know.
So they outsmarted each other.
That's right, you know. But those are along the same lines, the folks that their spouse is on a deathbed and they ask the attorney, well, when can we start the probate? You know.
Well, and let me do say this. I have seen prenuptial agreements take what could have been just terrible, messy divorces and make them really, really short hearings. And it's actually one of the things that I think is open to summary judgment. And once you get a summary judgment on the validity of the prenuptial agreement and the controlling nature of the prenuptial agreement, you real quickly go from this big cloud of issues to, well, here are the children's issues we have to deal with, and here are these 3 pieces of personal property that we have to deal with, and then it's over.
Yeah, and that's a perfect place to wrap up, because I think a prenuptial agreement makes things simpler than collaborative law. But that's my opinion. Our time is up for this edition of Law Talk. I'd like to thank our guest for taking time out of his busy schedule, being with us and sharing his thoughts and insights. If you'd like more information about Law Talk or any other program on Germantown Municipal Television, please refer to our website at www.gmtvonline.org. Thank you for joining us today, and be sure to join us next month for more legal topics. Until then, I'm Vince Perryman, and thank you for watching.